Welcome to the GC BizCast, a collaboration of J. Whitney Bunting College of Business and Technology and the Department of Communication at Georgia College and State University. Here we discuss important topics with today's business leaders and educators. We produce weekly podcasts from our beautiful campus in Milledgeville, Georgia. We're excited that you've joined us. Our conversations should inform you and entertain you. The views expressed are the views of the individuals on the program and do not represent the views of Georgia College and State University. So, let's get started.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GC BizCast Season 3. Today, we have a special guest, Mr. Jay Sullivan, who is author of Simply Said, The New Nimble, and a whole ton of other great books. Today, we're going to be talking to him about his books and then just kind of getting to know his background. So we'll just start it off. Jay, thank you for coming and meeting us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my first question for you is, so you've been a lawyer, a volunteer, an author, and a consultant. Can you illustrate kind of that pipeline or order of events for us? And then kind of how did one lead you to the next?
Sure. Well, I'm very excited to be here and also very excited for all of you as you go into your senior year, wrap up your college experience. My wife and I have 4 kids. We had 4 kids in 5 years, so we watched them all graduate very quickly through all these different levels of their education. And I always shared with my kids, you're not going to have 4 jobs in your life. You're likely to have 4 different careers. You're going to be doing lots of different things. And a lot of people think that their career path is this linear thing that just sort of moves forward. And I know, Charlotte, I believe, or Maura, you're about to start your job at Norfolk Southern. A career does not look like a set of train tracks that just keeps going in one line. It's one of those constant places where, think about the train tracks at the switching station where there are lots of different angles to go in. And that's what your own careers are going to look like. You're going to be constantly looking at what opportunities are in front of me, which track I can take. And that's what careers are about. So I graduated from Boston College way back in 1984. And BC is a Catholic university, and it has something called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. So I entered that, and I spent 2 years teaching English down in Kingston, Jamaica. So I started teaching at a boys' high school, and part of my job was to lead my students on the school's outreach program. So even in a poor country, in a school where there are many poor students, you were still expected to do community service. And so I would take my students from that school, and we started going over to a local orphanage. And I would take my students to go work with the little boys at the orphanage, and then fell in love with the orphanage and the group of sisters who were running the orphanage. So they allowed me to move in. So I moved into the orphanage and lived there for 2 years while I was teaching at the boys' high school. So I could work with the high school students during the day and the kids at the orphanage at night. And that led to my first book, Raising Gentle Men: Lives at the Orphanage Edge. And it ties in a little bit to what you're talking about and what we're going to be talking about, I guess, about these ideas of connecting people and how to make connections for people, because that's the theme throughout all 3 of the books. So for the orphanage, it was all about helping the kids build relationships with each other so they weren't alone in life. And then the community that the sisters had built and what kept them operating together and the people that they brought in to help them live their mission. So 2 years in Jamaica, went to law school at Fordham Law School in New York, got a job there's a law firm called Skadden Arps, which was giving fellowships to recent law grads to do 2 years of public interest work. And so I spent 2 years as in-house counsel at a place called Covenant House, which is a runaway shelter in New York. And they're actually they're a chapter in my latest book, The New Nimble. But worked at Covenant House there, met my wife there. She was not a runaway. She was a homeless kid. She had left her own family business to take a year sabbatical and work at Covenant House. But I do get to tell people I met my wife in a homeless shelter. And worked there for 2 years as a lawyer, then did 7 years of corporate law, and then transitioned over back to teaching because I enjoy teaching. But at that point, we had 4 kids. And so instead of going back into the school system, I teach corporate professionals. So I go to large law firms and corporations and teach public speaking and writing and negotiating and client development skills, all that kind of stuff. So lots of different paths. And I don't think that that's unusual. I think that many people that I've interacted with have had similar starts, and I wouldn't call them starts and stops because each thing led to something else very naturally. But very often people head down a path and then they see opportunities in other ways. And so they switch tack and they say, this excites me. There's something about this skill set that I could use in this setting that is very intriguing to me.
Yeah, I really like how you kind of comment on how exciting it is to have one thing lead to another, because I feel like, myself included, it is very daunting to think about choosing a career, or like I'm not at the age yet where I would choose a new career.
Right.
But career pivoting in general, I think there's a stigma around it where it's daunting and scary. And so I like that you kind of talk about it in a way where it's exciting, and you know, we have the luxury of being able to career pivot. And so
Right.
I really like that answer.
Well, just by hand raise between the three of you, how many of you have had questions from family and friends in the last couple of years saying, so what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like as colleges come, right? Exactly. So I would ask you, and there's always a lot of pressure with that, huge amounts of pressure. I would ask you to hear that question a little bit differently. Hear that question when somebody says, so what are you going to, like, particularly, I encourage all my kids to do liberal arts. So like they have philosophy degrees and poli-sci degrees, and people say, what are you going to do with that? But when you hear the question, what are you going to do? Hear it as, what are you going to do first? Because that takes all the pressure off of it. Well, you know what? First, I'm going to go work at Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do second later on. And that's great. That it's not, what am I going to do, as if once I get on this track, this is it. It's, what are you going to do first? Well, you know what? First, I'm going to go somewhere different and teach, or I'm going to go do something else. So
that is really great advice for all of our seniors listening. That it's not so permanent, I guess.
It doesn't have to be. It can be. If you find your passion right out of school, great. And you will have a wonderful time, and it'll keep you excited. But don't feel like that's the way it has to be.
So speaking of passion, was like effective communication something you were like, I want to make a career out of this? Or was it just something you kind of developed as you were in Jamaica? Or what did that look like?
Sure. I fell into this in many ways. So when I was practicing law, I reached out this is how fortuitous it is, and sometimes very happenstance how you end up with different opportunities. I'd been practicing law for 9 years. I decided I wanted to do something a little different, but I assumed I was going to do something different in the law. So even if you become a lawyer, you can do so many different things with a law degree. My youngest of our four, it just started her career as a lawyer at the Environmental Defense Fund in Washington. So while most students go to law school expecting to work at a law firm, she's gone the environmental route. So the way it came about for me to get into teaching communication skills. So I was an English teacher because that just happened right out of college. But in terms of going back to teaching, I was determined to leave my area of the law, reached out to a woman who had been the career planning person at Fordham Law School. She had left that role. I thought she was doing career advice. And I called her to say, I'm looking to do something different. And she happened to be working at Exec.com, where I currently work. And she said, you used to be a teacher. You would enjoy doing this. You should come on over here. And so I went over and I interviewed, and I thought I could do this. I would enjoy doing this. And when I had been at Covenant House, I was on the speakers bureau. So I would go around the country speaking on behalf of the agency. And I got training on public speaking skills. And I'd taken every public speaking class I could in college, in law, in high school, in law school. Any opportunity to take a public speaking class, they're always worth it. But Covenant House put us through speaker training. And I remember being in that class thinking, I had no idea people taught adults how to give presentations. And so when the opportunity presented itself, I said, I should do this. And I had a job. I had 2 job offers. I had one from Exec.com to be a consultant to firms and teach communication skills. And the other job I had was to be the government liaison for New York City's Catholic Charities. And I'd be going back and forth from New York to Washington, dealing with different issues that the Archdiocese was in favor of with regard to politics and public policy issues. And I had those 2 opportunities in front of me, and one Exec.com just moved faster with the opportunity, and I decided I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah, I was just wondering about your experience working with the teenagers and like working with the boys. How was that?
Well, at Covenant House, I had two roles at Covenant House. So I was there as the lawyer, but my job was to focus on two different things. There were 3 lawyers and 2 paralegals at Covenant House at the time. And the focus for my job was to work on behalf of 2 groups of the young people who would come through there. So at Covenant House, it's a place for homeless children, basically, teenagers who have either aged out of the foster care system or for some reason are just finding themselves homeless. Families dissolve sometimes, unfortunately. And the 2 groups I was working with, one were the young women who already had their own children, and so we call it the Moms and Babes unit. And so we had a lot of women who had children. They also might have been undocumented. They may have had other issues going on or other legal issues that I would be helping them with. A lot of it was just helping them get housing, but there were social workers to help them get the housing. Sometimes there were legal issues that had to be dealt with. The other group it was at the height of the AIDS epidemic. And Covenant House, because a lot of the kids, in order to survive, would be hustling. And so homeless teenagers had an incredibly horrific percent of AIDS issues. So a lot of them had AIDS and they were all going to die because it was the height of the epidemic and there was no cure. And so my job was to help them on AIDS discrimination issues. So if they were trying to get housing or they were trying to get some kind of services and they were being discriminated against because of their HIV status, my job was to help them get through that so they could get on with their whatever they could with regard to their lives. But Covenant House had the only HIV positive residential unit for young people in the country. And we were taking care of them.
I kind of have a question that goes off of that. Was that ever, and I'm sure that the answer is yes, but were you ever frustrated being I guess a new lawyer in that setting where these teens are, hustling to survive and, to make ends meet and put, get food in their belly and stuff like that. And, for that to be what they need to do to survive, I'm sure that was frustrating for you it almost seems paradoxical to me, which is, an issue in our system. But I guess how was that frustration for you to help these people? But, it's not their fault that they have to do what they have to do, but I just feel like that is very frustrating for you,
Well, the whole goal was nobody's doing that because they want to be doing that. Nobody. So what you were trying to do is say there is an option and you're trying to get them off the street. So as a member of the legal team, once a month, I would be in the van that would go to all the places around New York where kids were hustling and try to say, we'd give them food, we'd give them coffee, we'd give them you can come in the van and sit down and be warm for a while. And here's our card, come to the shelter and we can get you off the street. And so the whole idea was to get kids off the street and keep them safe.
Yeah.
That sounds like really, really important work. Did you feel like the transition between doing your work at Covenant House and in Jamaica was did you think that the transition into corporate law is difficult just because they're very different and the issues that you're facing are quite on different?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the work in Jamaica was set up to be a 2-year program. So I knew I would be there for 2 years and then I'd be coming back and I'd plan to go to law school. And they were very different environments because the orphanage in Jamaica had 250 boys at it and had been around for 100 years. And then there were nuns there taking care of the kids, but it was 3 nuns, a very small support team, and then me sort of on the side helping out where I could. Covenant House was very different. That was my full-time job. And it was, and I had an expertise at that. Expertise is the wrong word. I had the beginning of some skills. Since I just graduated law school, I had no expertise and very low skills, but I had something that was supposed to be, I quickly learned how to be helpful to the kids in those situations. But they came in with all sorts of different issues. And so you just you do your best to deal with what's in front of you at the moment. And then making the transition from that to corporate law, and you will all experience this as you go through your own careers, that you are different things appeal to you at different times. And sometimes you do things because you need to. And I don't mean the kids who are hustling, but I mean, I finished 2 years. So I met my wife at Covenant House. We got married at the end of my 2-year stint at Covenant House. And so I was transitioned to corporate law at that point. And we started a family fairly quickly. So I needed to have an income. And I was fine doing my legal work. And I did it for 7 years. And it was a good job. It was very stable. It helped us have 4 kids in 5 years. But after a while, I said, I don't see myself doing this for my entire career. So it was actually a really good job to have at that point in my career, and it met the needs that we had as a family. And you will do that. You will be in a job for a while, and you'll say, I'm kind of done with this, but I think I need to give this a couple more years because I have to pay off my student loans, because I have to gain enough experience before I move on to something else. If I stay in this for 3 years, I will gain so much more than if I try to leave right now, and that might be valuable. But also, you might stay in a job a little bit longer and say, now I'm starting to enjoy this. Like I get to do something different, or I feel like I'm actually contributing differently. Have you ever heard of the term imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Yes.
So imposter syndrome, that idea that any minute now, somebody's going to find out I don't know what I'm doing. And like I'm completely faking it, right? A lot of new college grads have that feeling. I'm going to ask you to let go of that feeling, because you don't have to worry about people finding out you don't know what you're doing, because you're just out of college. Everybody already knows you don't know what you're doing, and that's fine. It's absolutely fine to not know what you're doing. If you knew what you were doing, I wouldn't be hiring you right out of college. I'd be hiring somebody with experience. They're hiring you because you come in with some innate talent, and you come in with innate skills. So again, just by Henry's, how many of you think you're smart? Okay, it's actually a trick question. You know you're smart. You don't think you're smart. You know you're smart. So you're smart. Do you think you work hard? Yeah, right? You all work hard. You're smart and you work hard, and that is what people are paying you for. You're getting hired. Whatever company hires you, they will hire you because you work, because you're smart and you're willing to work hard. And then you just stay open to opportunities.
Didn't realize we would get so many compliments in this episode. I feel so grateful. I really enjoy like your background and everything that you said. Just about everything. I actually can't even cherry pick it right now. I haven't processed how great it is. I kind of wanted to take all of your experiences, because you communicate with so many different walks of life and so many different groups of people, just a very diverse income wise, gender, race, ethnicity, everything. And so you have all of this experience being a, great communicator and great with leadership. What do you think, for somebody that does not have your experience or the same opportunities that you have had to see all of these different walks of life, what do you think that people's most common mistake is when they're trying to improve their communication skills?
Great. Well, I appreciate your asking it that way. First of all, we all have a lot more diverse experiences than we think we do. And even at your tender ages, right, like just graduating college, you have so much more experience when you think about it than you really give yourself credit for. You have likely been exposed. Have any of you ever had a job? Any job? Yeah. Okay. That was a tremendous amount of experience that you got in that job, whatever that was. If you had 2 jobs, you had 2 radically different kinds of experiences. And so you want to be thinking about constantly asking yourself, what did I learn from that experience? So after this podcast, take a minute, and I would challenge all 3 of you to write down a list of every job you've ever had. And I mean, if you were a babysitter at one point, if you coached a kid's soccer team, if you like whatever task you had, and say to yourself, what did I learn? First of all, learn in an abstract sense, and then what did I learn about myself in each of those jobs. And that's a great exercise to go through because it helps you understand, wow, I've got a lot of experience. Actually, I have some value here. I once in New York saw a woman around your age walking down the sidewalk, and she had on a t-shirt that just said, "I bring absolutely nothing to the table." And I got a kick out of it. I laughed, but then I thought that's a nice, humble expression of perspective. I said, but she's wrong. She probably brings a lot to the table. She just hasn't really analyzed yet, or that doesn't make it just not a good t-shirt. So I wouldn't call it they don't do as well, just miss an opportunity. So if you've read Simply Said, the theme of everything in it is all about being less about yourself and more about the other person. Focus less on you, more on the other person. Always asking yourself, why is she reading my email? Why is he attending my meeting? Why are they listening to this presentation? I always want to ask myself, why are they asking that? Or why are they engaged in this communication? And that's going to make you a better communicator. And focusing less on you and more on the other person does not mean that your needs don't need to be met. Your needs are essential. They have to be met. I want you to get your needs met. You're more likely to get those needs met if you think about what the other person is trying to get out of the exchange.
There's been so many recent shifts in the past, 3 or 4 years because of COVID in the workplace.
Yep.
Where, obviously more people are working remote. How do we go about connecting with others when it's not that it's not prioritized anymore, because safety should always be prioritized, but how do we go about connecting with other people?
Right.
I guess, that's my question.
Yeah.
How do we go about that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it is a challenge. It's going to be a bigger challenge for people launching their careers than people who are well into their careers like me. Mm-hmm. And it's about intentionality. It's about being deliberate about the way we connect with people. And we will never go back to a world where everybody's in the office 5 days a week. It's just never going to happen again. But people are going to have to, we continue to have to interact with each other. That's what's going to allow us to function and accomplish our goals. We have to be a lot more intentional about how we make those connections. So there will be days where I'll say, I'm going to work from home, and I'm working from home today, and I'm not at my office. But I am very intentional about, I need to get in the office more to connect with people. How do I make that happen? When I'm not in the office, how do I reach out to enough people to make sure I'm having the interactions? For people your age, and launching their careers, it's especially difficult. It takes one level of energy to maintain relationships. It takes a whole other level of energy to build relationships. Yeah. So people who have already been in the workforce for a couple of years pre-COVID had already built the connections that they needed. So during COVID, they just needed to maintain them. Still had to work at it, but you're maintaining it and you already know these people. People who are just new to the workforce, you have to really work hard to build those relationships. You should use every chance you get to be in the setting, whatever setting that is, where people are coming together, because there's so much learning that happens organically, that happens where people are finally interacting with each other. So in the New Nimble, the New Nimble, I profile 9 different professions really, and how each one of them either got through COVID or dealt with the insurrection at the Capitol and the aftermath of it, or addressed issues that happened with the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or dealt with some of the social injustice issues that have taken a more prominent role rightly in the news, and that we're trying to figure out how to address. And all those different things that have made us have to be more nimble in our thinking. And what is clear is from a lot of those interviews is the ability to bring people together makes all the difference in the world in having the right conversations. And so people just have to be more intentional about it.
Yeah. I love that answer, because I remember reading that in the New Nimble where you said the word organic, which is what you also used in the book, but of it's just how easy it is to second guess yourself when you are virtual, of, like an idea can't really happen organically anymore when you bump into a coworker versus, I have this thought, is this worth emailing her for? And, does she have time on her calendar, and almost like feeling like a burden, which I feel like can also translate really well into like us soon to be like recent grads, because, we know nothing. And so we don't want to be a burden by asking, but I like that you,
You really read the book. I'm impressed.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, there's a theme that ties together all three books, even though they're very different books. Would it be helpful if I share with that how
Yeah.
that's structured?
Yeah, of course.
So the main idea in all three books, whether it's Raising Gentlemen, which is about the orphanage, Simply Said, which is all about communication skills, and The New Nimble, which is all about us learning to connect with people better, the main and how to deal and make decisions faster. But then there are three things that connect all of it. Number one, we have to reflect on and think about and know who we are, which is what I think is so great about your podcast. You're helping students think about who they are and be intentional about who they are. So, you know, Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So we have to reflect on who we are and think about that. But just examining our life is not enough. So it's not like the academic exercise of I have to think about who I am and okay, now I'm done. Because what if I look at who I am, I reflect on who I am, and I decide, yep, I've thought about myself and my behaviors, and apparently I'm a jerk, but that's okay because I've reflected on who I am, and that's all I had to do. That's not good enough. So you have to reflect on who you are, but then you have to make sure that who you are adds value. So I'm actually contributing to society in some way. So I haven't just reflected on who I am, but I've decided who I am, and I've figured out how I can be a person who adds value. And the third part is you have to build a community of people around you to live out that goal and that ability to add value, because none of us can do anything on our own. We need other people. And so in all three books, it's about figuring out who you are and being conscious and knowing who you are, making sure who you are adds value and defining yourself that way, and then making sure that you've built community that helps you live that out.
Love that. I really, really enjoy that structure of like, I guess I don't want to call it a trilogy because they're all different books, but you know, everything that you've written.
Yeah, very different books, but
for sure.
And it wasn't until I thought about it, I thought, and I don't talk about those three things in the books, but that is what happens in the books and what you'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a really great answer. I think Maura, you had a question, right?
Yeah. So we were talking about adaptability and just how everyone, like no one's working in the office anymore. COVID really shook everything up. How should the leaders and the managers in the workplace, what steps can they take to foster that adaptability when everyone is moving when everyone is on different pages? How can the managers and the leaders in that work setting foster that culture of adaptability?
Sure. Well, first of all, I wouldn't necessarily say that nobody's in the office anymore. There are a lot of the law firms I'm dealing with, and a lot of my clients are requiring 3 days a week in the office, and some of them are saying 4, some are saying 5, but I don't think they're going to actually get people to show up. But the idea of requiring people to be in and be in at the same time. So a lot of firms aren't just saying you have to do 3 days over the course of 5. They're saying Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everybody's in the office. And they're doing that because they want people to be together. What good is it if I come into the office on a Tuesday if that's not the day that all the people I have to interact with show up? So we've got to have a little bit more structure around that. And the way managers can help facilitate that is to figure out, how do I make coming to the office valuable for people? It's not helpful to demand people come to the office. Managers have to make coming to the office attractive. So if you're all about to launch your careers, if you say, I need to get to the office, or you're listening to somebody old like me saying, you should really get in the office a lot, and you're thinking, I go to the office, but why? I'm not gaining anything from being in the office. What it means is that the more experienced people have to get into the office, because that's when you get exposure to them and you have a better experience with work and you're building better relationships. Every industry you're in is a relationship industry. No matter what job you take, it's all about building relationships. And that's where you're going to be most successful, by thinking about, and not like in a Machiavellian way, who do I need to build a relationship with and like really strategize. It's more about, I will be better served as a professional. I will grow better if I build more relationships with more people to try to understand. I'm conscious of it, and I'm thinking about what I'm learning from these different people and these different experiences. So a manager's job is to make coming to the office attractive. And the way they need to do that is they need to be in the office.
That's good. Can you elaborate a little bit about just this idea of nimbleness and like being quick to adapt and stuff like that?
Sure. So the whole idea of, and the way I've broken out the new nimble is to break into three pieces. The first is all about knowing yourself, right?
Mhm.
And so it's that idea of, do you understand your organization's mission? So I can't be nimble in the way I react to a situation if I'm not conscious of who am I, what's my skill set, what am I able to do, what am I not able to do, what can I control? So in COVID, there was so much we couldn't control. So you can't fight that. You have to say, this stuff is outside my control. The government is going to make rules about where I can go and when I can go, or how many people can be in the room. I have to live within those confines. I can't change those. So I decide what I can deal with and what I can't. And I have to understand what my mission is. So the first chapter is all about understanding your mission. The second is about a company's values. And I profiled a organic food, a vertical farming company. So they take over warehouses in urban centers and they create vertical farms so that they can produce produce closer to the markets where it's being sold. So instead of transporting lettuce from California to New York, you're growing it in New York. And so their job, that chapter is all about their values. And the third chapter in the first section is about healthcare systems and a hospital in the Midwest and what they were faced with, which was just unbelievable compared to the rest of us, because they were actually dealing with people dying during COVID. And so what they were in control of and what they couldn't control, and being able to make that decision and accept that and work within it. So the first section is all about understanding who you are and your parameters. The second section is all about asking good questions. And that's when it comes down to, I can't service a population. I can't be of service to my clients if I don't ask good questions and find out what they need. So in the second session of the book, again, three companies and all about how they were providing services. And it's really very much, that section is very much employee focused. First two chapters are about how to take care of your employees and ask good questions of your employees. The third chapter in the second section is all about higher education, so university, and how universities dealt with COVID and some major demographic changes that are happening that'll impact higher ed. And then the third section is all about just get it done. How do you move it forward? How do you make decisions quickly? And the number one way you do that is you have to build practice. It's like anything else. Are you good at it? You will be more nimble at it if you're good at it, if you have experience at it. So how able am I to make decisions? It depends on how much practice I have at it. If I'm the kind of person or the kind of organization that always delays making decisions, that tries to ride things out, that just says, let's kick that can down the road. So they're not making decisions. Actually, that is a decision to make, but it's the decision that doesn't allow you to move to other decisions. But if you're to be nimble, you have to be the kind of organization that is comfortable making decisions. And a lot of that depends on what kind of data do we have available? Do we trust our data? Lots of organizations I've seen where they get these computer printouts and everybody will say, well, yeah, but we know that data is not that good. Well, if the data is not good, then you don't trust your decisions, and then it makes you freeze because you won't make a decision because you don't trust your information. So, and throughout all of it, what you'll see in every one of those organizations is it's all about, do we trust the people around us? And if we trust the people around us, we'll make better decisions.
I don't mean to play devil's advocate, but I was reading and I had a question about one of the quotes in your book. It's actually from the New Nimble. And it was on page 82 that you wrote, quote, "What could be more relevant to being nimble than the idea of flowing easily with the circumstances around us?" Which I love. And I don't think that could even be taken the wrong way. But one of the questions that I had while reading that was, although adaptability is great, how do we ensure that our voices don't get lost in group settings if we are so focused on adapting? Because I think when I first read that, I kind of immediately thought about like the possibility of groupthink, which I know is not like what at all you're in support of or writing about.
Right.
But I did just kind of want to ask your advice on how to steer clear of that,
How to steer clear of groupthink and
or of just kind of adapting too much to the point where you would lose your own identity or would, I don't know. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, and by adaptability, I wouldn't. First of all, Charlotte, I think it's a really insightful question because it's something that, particularly as younger people in the workforce, you're going to fall into. You're going to think, I need to get on board with these other ideas, and by adaptability and the idea of when you're more able to be more nimble when you're moving forward. That when you've got a process that you're thinking about. But in this case, what you're really asking about is I teach a class for a lot of my clients on critical thinking skills. And the way you become conscious of avoiding groupthink is to challenge what is the source of that information? What is the source of those ideas? So there's another book, which I did not write, called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics. It is a almost required reading in a lot of business schools, grad programs. It's like 600 pages. It's really dense. It's really complicated, but it's good. And it's got some core ideas in it that I use to create a class on critical thinking. And one of those ideas is the idea of both anchoring and herding. Those are two common phrases. I don't know if you've ever heard about them, but anchoring is when a conversation, where the discussion around a conversation is anchored because the first person threw out a date or a time or a dollar amount, and that anchors the conversation. If you ever bought a car, then you show up at the lot and the dealer says, here's the sticker price. And that sticker price anchors the conversation. So if the sticker price for the car is $30,000, at no point is that car being sold for 10, because that's so far away from the anchor. But the car is also not going to be sold for $40,000. The price has been set by somebody. There'll be movement, but the movement is all around the price that is set by somebody else, right? And let's use a more relevant example for all of you. If you're working for somebody and they say, let's say that I work for Maura, and I report to her and she needs something from me. So she says, Jay, when am I going to get that report? And she's hoping I say tomorrow. And I say, I can get that for you a week from Friday. I'll have that ready. She's a little stunned. She wants it tomorrow, and I'm promising it a week from Friday. But I've anchored success on getting this as a week from Friday. So if she negotiates with me and I get it to her next Monday instead of Friday, she feels like it's a win, but she still wants it tomorrow. But she feels like there's a benefit. And that's anchoring. And the other part of that is herding. So herding has to do with when everybody starts getting behind an idea. And so the way it works is if one person anchors something and they throw out an idea, and you've done group projects at school. Have you done any group projects? Okay. Somebody throws an idea. One person says, I really like that. All of a sudden there's momentum. If a second person says, I like that too, now there is so much momentum going toward that one idea that everybody else says, I can't get in trouble if I just go along because it seems like a lot of people like this. And it takes a really brave soul to say, that sounds like a really good idea. Before we move forward, what other good ideas are there? And you open the door to other people contributing more ideas. And if you do that, and you're brave enough to do that, then what you're doing is you're being a more critical thinker. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, yes, that's good. But just because there's all of a sudden momentum, it doesn't, like, we need to have other ideas and other voices in there. So feel free, and you don't have to say, I don't like that idea. You can say, that's great. We should talk about other good ideas too, and see what else you can contribute. That way you stay positive, you're opening the door for new ideas, and you're not letting the momentum quash creativity.
It's been a really great conversation, and I was just wondering if there was any one last piece of advice you could give to people about just communicating in their daily lives throughout, like, interpersonal relationships, professional relationships. What last piece of advice could you give to everyone listening?
Sure. I'll try to keep it real quick. When you're talking to people, you can only talk about one of three things. You can talk about yourself, you can talk about your content, You can talk to the audience about the audience. Those are the only things we can ever talk about: ourselves, the content, the audience. Well, in a business setting, nobody cares about you, nothing personal, but it's not about me when I'm talking, it's about the audience. They don't really care about your content. That's a really hard thing for people to hear. We think it's all about our content. Nobody cares about our content. They care about how our content impacts them, which is different from the content itself. So the goal is always to talk to the audience about the audience. Easy to say, but here's what it means in execution. Do you all have something to write with?
Yes.
Okay, real quickly, just write down this line. Write down, what I want to talk about today is ... What I want to talk about today is. What I want to talk about today is. That's how almost everybody starts talking at a meeting. What I want to talk about. So look at that line. You, the content, the audience. Who is that line about?
You.
It's all about me. Exactly. What I want to talk about. Almost everybody starts a meeting by saying what I want to cover, what I want to do today, what I want to talk about. And nobody cares what you want, nothing personal. So cross that out and now write down, just cross it out. Cross it out. And now write down, and I won't make you cross this out because you want to get away from that language. Write down, what I thought might be helpful to you today is. What I thought might be helpful to you today is. When you start with that language, two things happen. First, you've told your audience, might be an audience of 1 or 100, but you've told your audience, I put all my thinking into you and what's important to you. But much more importantly, before you even get on that Zoom call or into that meeting or into that performance review with somebody, when you start with that language, when you have that language running through your head, you start challenging yourself on, is this really helpful to them? Because your only legitimate reason for being in the room is to be helpful to somebody else. So if you start with the language, what I thought would be helpful to you, and you have that running through your head before you even go to the meeting, you will be a more effective communicator because you will be thinking about, why is this helpful? You'll eliminate the jargon. You'll eliminate the words that they won't necessarily understand. You'll put the most important stuff up front, and you'll state it really simply.
Thanks, Jay. Full of great answers.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, Jay, we really appreciate your time and everything that you said. I think the biggest thing I know when I listen back to this episode is, I think overall you focused really on like, how can I add value to other people? And I think if we all thought like that, then the world would be a really great place. And it just makes sense that you would touch on those things so much because of your time in Jamaica and because of your time in the Covenant House for Teens and all that stuff. I just really appreciate like all of the lessons that you have given us today. And the new Nimble was fantastic. So everybody definitely needs to order a copy and go read it. And yeah, we really appreciate like everything that you've said today, and I can't wait to hear this back.
Great. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time.